Hey, good morning, team. It is Tuesday, April 23rd. I'm Amy Corr. I'm really excited. Kevin Van Eck and I are in the same room again.
That's right.
It's been a few weeks,
It
right?
has. It's good to be back.
Yes. Well, we have a great conversation today. We're going to talk a bit about your buyer interview. More and more agents are talking to us about the reality, I think that we all know, which it's time to make sure our buyer interview and our buyer process is tight. So today we're going to get into it and give you some great tips to think about. On that note, we know what to do. Make sure you've got a hot cup of coffee, and let's jump into the next episode of Coffee with Amy and Kevin.
That's right. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Amy.
Good morning.
Got a fresh cup of coffee?
Yes.
We're set.
Fresh and ready to go.
So this is huge, right? Because this is, the talk of the town for the last month and then even prior into last year. So buyer interview, this has become increasingly more important to spend time here and not rush through it and not skip it, whether we're working with family, friends, or new referral sources, right? So the cool thing about this, though, is that it gives us an opportunity because it's been really easy to establish our professionalism with listings.
Right.
We have a listing presentation. We outline how and what we're going to do to get them to where they want to go. Now this is we're being forced to do this now with buyers, which is only going to be an opportunity to take the conversations that we either don't have or we have too late, bring them to the front. And then also, like we said, elevate our professionalism.
Mm-hmm. And I actually love that this is, kind of forcing us to up our game with buyers. To your point, I think so many people throw them into a car, started showing them properties. And
Right.
A lot of these conversations were happening in the middle or on the back end of, really important moments of finding the houses that they loved and people not always understanding the process. And it's interesting because there was actually a survey done by NAR
Right.
that was taken and asked consumers what their biggest concerns were when they worked with buyer brokers, which I thought was so interesting because these are basically the three elephants in the room when we think about why a buyer may hesitate or not want to work with us. So they're really easy. So take notes. The first one was FOMO. And really what that meant was that they were afraid that their agent, let's say Kevin, if I'm interviewing you as my potential buyer broker, that Kevin maybe wouldn't have enough insight into all of the houses on or off the market. So I'm afraid or fearful of, am I going to be missing out on that actual home that I want?
Right.
So Kevin, as the agent, needs to make sure when you're meeting with me for the first time that you can help me know that you do have access to all those properties, right? The second biggest concern was being railroaded, meaning is this agent that I'm working with just going to try and find a home for me as quickly as possible and just want me to get through the process so that I'm kind of checked off their list and that they move on.
Slam them in.
So taking time, making sure that they feel like you care is going to be a critical piece. And then the last one was overpaying. And we know in a lot of these markets right now, let's face it, it's competitive, prices have gone up. So there's a lot of feeling of overpaying going on, and maybe it can't be avoided, but by having the conversation about what overpaying or being competitive is really, I think, more of what we would call it in a market right now, sharing and talking to a buyer at the onset, right up front in this conversation and getting them over that fear of overpaying because they really, in all honesty, probably have to be competitive in order to be the winning bid. So I loved that these are the three things. So if you take nothing else from today in my mind, know that they're afraid of FOMO, they're afraid of you railroading them, and also afraid of overpaying. So figure out how you address those.
Right. Know that's in their mind when you're talking with them during that initial buyer meeting, right? So with that, one way to I guess, make them feel confident in you that you are going to find them the property, that you aren't going to railroad, and that you are going to guide them appropriately is to have, you could do it during your value proposition. If you have this ironed out, and I think we talk about this with listings, right? We're equating it almost to a listing presentation. One of the things we do to elevate our professionalism from the very first interaction is that we give them collateral, we give them material after that first conversation. Right. And so in some of our markets, we have in platform, we have a digital buyer presentation, and we're expanding that. It's rolling out to other markets, but that's a great way to make them feel confident in you after that first conversation. And also, talking about that first conversation, that's an opportunity. If you know that buyers are concerned about these three things, you can maybe not necessarily address them directly, but you can speak to how you handle those three situations and set expectations. Right. And to your point, you said something great, which is it's much easier to have a conversation about what to expect up front than when they are writing an offer and you're telling them to go to an uncomfortable place, being competitive.
I mean, the worst time to get those details in is when they're highly emotional.
Yes.
You know, when you talk with them before they even see that magic, beautiful, wonderful house where they've already moved their furniture in, right? You're having this conversation and kind of level setting right up front. And so then you can always come back and say, hey, remember when we first sat down and I told you we were going to go through this? Here we are, right? And then you look like an expert, not like somebody who's railroading them, you know, into a situation.
Completely.
Yeah.
So then the third thing we want to talk about is the buyer agreement. So with this buyer meeting, this is your opportunity, right?
Yep.
And that buyer agreement now becomes, because of everything that's happened, it's become, in theory, easier to present because we have to do it. And in some markets, it's been easy already. Some markets are ahead of us because they were required to do certain things or disclose everything up front already. In certain states, it wasn't mandatory. But now the buyer, this meeting is the opportunity to make sure that we have these conversations and drive it in advance. And for this, I think you've been talking about a great way to approach it, because that's the question for those of us that haven't had to do it.
Yes.
So how do we approach, if we're in this buyer presentation, buyer interview, what do you do?
Yeah, I mean, and that's a good question, because I think for so many agents, it's like, okay, I have this agreement. I need them to sign it in this presentation right when I've met them for the first time. And let's think about, you know, as we said, the listing presentation. You know, oftentimes the first time we meet them, they're not necessarily signing. I mean, sometimes they fall in love with us right away. It happens. But otherwise, they need to kind of think about it. But you have to at least get it in front of them so they have the opportunity to absorb kind of what's happening next. So at this meeting, your first kind of 30-minute consult, we're going through all of these different things. I would encourage you to then say, listen, I want to introduce you to the exclusive buyer broker agreement. This is something that, you know, we're going to talk about signing. I don't expect you to sign this today. Here's what I'd like us to do. And it's kind of a try before you buy concept, but you can say, look, let's go ahead and pick a Saturday or Sunday, this upcoming weekend. Let's spend a half a day together. We'll go ahead and take a look at 3 or 4 houses. And let's try each other out. Let's make sure you feel really comfortable with how I show you what I'm capable of doing as your agent, and, you know, some of my experience in helping clients find a home. And you get the opportunity to also just make sure that this feels good. You know, this is supposed to be a relationship where we both are feeling good and want to move forward. But what I'll expect, and this is kind of the key, is what you can say is, but what I'll expect is after we go out on that afternoon, in order for us to move forward, I'd like us to sign this buyer broker agreement. And I'd like us to sign it, right? Because ultimately they sign it, I sign it, my managing broker signs it, right? So it's sort of an agreement we are signing together. So I found a lot of agents feel more comfortable with this approach because, again, it's the first time you've maybe talked to them. It is them getting a little bit more comfortable with your style and feeling confident and not rushed into having to sign, you know, an agreement.
I love that, because it gives you the opportunity then as an agent to show them again, you know, their 3 biggest fears, show them that you're not that, you know, that they have no reason to be concerned in working with you.
Yeah. And then there's one quote that I think is really amazing. I think actually I gave it to you to talk about.
You did.
But we can't leave people without having this, because I think
this is a good one.
It's such a good one in this conversation.
So here's the thing. This is when we get to the buyer presentation and the value proposition. You know, a lot of times it's easier with a listing to talk about our value because it's tangible. Again, we can talk about marketing, exposure, all of these things that are a little bit less touchy-feely. When it comes to buyers, there's 2 things. One is make a list of all the ways that you are different, but also remember that for each buyer, there's going to be a different value that they're looking for based on previous experience. So the question that Amy's talking about is asking that buyer when you're there in that presentation or on the initial call, you know, what are 2 or 3 things that you expect from our experience together? And then you're going to hear what's important to them. And you're going to be able to address that in your value proposition and the rest of your conversations, not only then, but throughout your entire relationship together.
Yeah. And it's basically allowing them the opportunity to share with you what their expectations are of the experience they're about to have. So love it. We hope that you got some great tidbits out of today, but let's face it, that buyer presentation or that buyer meeting is becoming more and more critical. So practice it, role play it with colleagues, your managing broker, but make sure this becomes a part of what you do whenever you're working with clients. So make it a great Tuesday. We'll look forward to seeing you next week. But remember, until then, you've got this.